Afternoon. Let's get started then. My name is Richard Cripps. I am a biology professor and a co-principal investigator of the SDSU-UCSD Moores Cancer Center Partnership, which alongside substantial support from SDSU's Student Success Fee program has made this event possible. We welcome to our second panel in the Spring 2022 Cancer Speaker Series, this time focused upon cancer advocacy and activism. And we're excited to host today a distinguished panel of talented and passionate investigators, all of whom are working to reduce the burden and disparities of cancer. We're grateful to you for your time and participation this afternoon. My main task today is to introduce the students who have organized this speaker series again, Amber Davis and Giovanna Raggio. Amber and Giovanna are undergraduate student leaders and cancer research trainees that have gone through our Partnership Scholars Program, and they worked together to submit the request for funding, brainstorm the ideas for panel topics, and to create discussion topics. So Amber and Giovanna, please welcome to the front.
Good afternoon, everybody. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Kumeyaay people. For millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the San Diego State community, we acknowledge this legacy. We promote this balance and harmony. We find inspiration from this land of the Kumeyaay. Now we will go on to the agenda for today's panel. For the first half hour, we will introduce our panelists along with their presentations discussing their research experiences as community activists. Then we will go over a moderated panel discussion where our moderator will ask our panelists a set of prepared questions along with some from the audience for discussion. At 4:15 p.m., we will adjourn our panel session to join the next part of the event, the networking session. Please note that everyone is welcome to join us at a networking session where you will be able to interact with our panelists and leaders from our program. Now, I would like to leave the podium to Amber Davis, who will introduce our speakers for today.
Okay, hello. It is with great honor that we introduce to you all of our panelists for today. First, we have Myra Serrano, Senior Manager of the Center for Community Alliance for Fellowship and Education at City of Hope. Next, Dr. Irene Su, Professor of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences at UC San Diego. Helen Palomino is a medical social worker and Chief Executive Officer for the Cancer Resource Center of the Desert. Tammy Blackburn is the Senior Director of Marketing and Communications for SDSU's University Relations. Last but not least, we have Carly Decosta, undergraduate researcher and student activist at SDSU. She is currently a research scholar with SDSU Stem Cell Internship Program known as CERM, and was previously a research scholar with the SDSU-UCSD Cancer Partnership. In addition to her research experience, Carly has served as the president for the SDSU Black Student Science Organization and served as a feminist peer educator and women and gender equity mentor for SDSU's Women's Resource Center. And I'd like to introduce Karina Moyano, Community Outreach and Engagement Coordinator associated with UC San Diego Moores Cancer Center. And we will now hand the microphone over to our speakers who will be discussing their research with the audience. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everybody. I guess I have the pleasure of kicking this off today. So I brought a couple of slides just to kind of showcase a little bit about our work. But I titled it Taking Action Together for Healthier Communities, because it is a collaborative effort between us researchers and our community. So it's a bi-directional relationship. But I know since this was, kind of focused, the target audience was students, I also wanted to include a little bit about my career pathway. So that first picture is a 4-year-old graduating from Head Start, who did not speak English, by the way. And she also had immigrant undocumented parents. So that is my first graduation picture when I was in Head Start. And then that's my headshot over at City of Hope, and that's a picture of my family. And so I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of my background, coming from a first generation, being the first to go to college, the first to get a master's, in a couple months, the first to get a doctorate. And so that is really my journey, having to basically learn everything from scratch. I didn't have anybody who knew how to navigate any of the systems. And so it was a little bit difficult, but one of the things I like to do now is mentor others so that they don't have to go through the barriers that I had to go to begin with. And the reason I'm also showing my family, it's because it's one of the reasons I went into cancer research. Unfortunately, cancer runs rampant in my family. We actually carry the genetic mutation for breast cancer in our family. And so it's something, that has been a passion of mine. My grandmother died from cancer. And so that's really what, inspired me to follow that. But it really pinpoints to one part. So this is my education timeline. So I actually didn't have the traditional timeline. I started off out of high school, went to UCLA, was there about 2 years. Wasn't a huge fan of the big state school. Coming, being the big fish in the small high school, going to being the little fish in the big pond. So it didn't really work for me. So I ended up going to a very small liberal arts college called Whittier College in Whittier, California, where I currently live. Absolutely fell in love with the small liberal arts school. But then I did go back to UCLA for my master's, and I'm at UNC now finishing up my dissertation. So that's in between my master's, and I actually worked through every single school that I went to, because there was no such thing as a college fund. When I asked my mom about college fund, I think my senior year in high school, she said, "You're lucky you have a roof over your head, so no college fund for you." But I worked, so it wasn't really traditional. So when I got my bachelor's, it did take me 6 years to get my bachelor's. And then I started an internship at City of Hope. And this internship is really what changed my life, because I originally wanted to go to medical school. And it was this exposure to public health and cancer research that really shaped my career pathway. And so I worked there for a few years, went to UCLA in their executive program to get my MPH, so work full-time and go to school full-time, and then actually did the same with UNC in their DRPH program, where I'm working full-time and going to school full-time. But just to show you a little bit that, there's different career pathways to get to where you want to be. So I came today, I'm going to highlight just one. I don't have too much time, so I'm going to highlight one project. So we do, all of the work that we do is community participatory research, partnered participatory research. So it's actually led by the community partners. So as I mentioned, it's a bi-directional relationship where I think I learn more often things than the community partner does. And so I'm going to highlight an activity that we did with our teens in the city of Duarte, which is the city that City of Hope is settled in Los Angeles County. And so we just gave them the tools and they ran with it. So the first tool we gave them was we taught them how to do community needs assessments. And one of the things we told them, we said, how about we do a photo voice project? And it's perfect for teens because they always have a phone in their hands. They're always taking pictures anyway. We decided, why don't we make this a social media campaign? So this is an Instagram post. And we created a hashtag called COH Photo Voiced and Healthy Teens SGV, which stands for San Gabriel Valley. And so we asked them, why don't you go around your neighborhood and take pictures that would affect your health either positively or negatively? And, we gave them about a week to go around taking pictures. And this was a common picture. So this is a park that's literally 2 blocks away from the hospital. As you can see here, there's a cigarette butt that's centered in the sand, and you have a metal playground in the back. Now, for those of you old enough to remember, I'm sure you lost some skin sliding down that metal slide in the summertime, actually throwing some sand on there so it'd cool off a little. But the students were saying that no families used the park because men would do drugs or smoke or, there's illegal activity at that park. So it really wasn't used to its full potential. So when we saw that, common theme amongst the students, then we had already done some advocacy training. So they knew how to talk to policymakers and to leadership. And their first step was to present to the mayor's youth council to get more youth involved in this. And then they actually presented to the city council and the director of Parks and Rec. So sometimes you're at the right place at the right time. And I was so excited that the students got this experience. There happened to be some funding that they had from Southern California Edison. And they actually used that funding to remake the park. And so this is what you see here, the pictures of the grand opening of the students here. They're peer health educators. So you see them having, a drinks table showing people how much sugar is in their drinks. But you can see that the park now has a different playground. It actually has barbecue areas. They included more lighting in there. But the best part of the park is that it's now the only park in the city with adult exercise equipment. And they even put canopies because in the San Gabriel Valley, it can get a little warm. And then one of the things we also did is we involved the community in the planning of the park. So the original urban planners had planned to have the exercise equipment across the park. And the parents said, no, I want to see my kids playing on the playground while I'm exercising. So as you can see from one of the pictures, you can exercise while you can see your kids playing in the park. And so you see one of those teens, they say they're really proud now that they walk by that park every day and they get to see the impact that they have. I get to drive by it often too and see families actually using that park. So again, I thought these pictures were great to show that impact of that community advocacy. And really all we did was, build their capacity to be advocates and build their capacity to do some assessments. And we were able to change the built environment together. So, definitely want to say thank you to our community partners and our teams. And this is our team at City of Hope that works in community outreach and engagement. But I'll hand it over next to Helen and Irene.
Hi, everyone. I'm Irene Sue. I am an OBGYN and a reproductive endocrinologist at UC San Diego, and this is my partner in crime.
I'm Helen Palomino. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and CEO of the Cancer Resource Center of the Desert in El Centro, California.
So we'll take Myra's lead and maybe tell you a little bit about how we got here, to open up the conversation for later and how there are lots of different paths to really advocating for our cancer survivors, and then talk about one of the projects where we've had lots of partners and lots of fun together. So I was born in Taiwan and came when I was 8. My parents are medical and legal professionals, but truly new to this country, kind of moved east-west, just not over any of the states in the middle. I went to college in Northern California, medical school in New York. I decided to go to medical school because it's a family business, but the goal was to be a psychiatrist because being bilingual and bicultural, you understand the need to deliver culturally appropriate care. But the first time that I saw a healthy baby born and that my hands were on that baby, amazing. And I think that's how I came into women's health and still feel super compelled by it because, as many of you know, women's health is under attack. And so being able to speak up for it and care for patients so that they can safely get through and build their families, it's pretty cool. Okay, so then I went to med school in New York, and then I did all of my residency and fellowship training in Philadelphia. And my husband is also in medicine, so we were dual recruited to UCSD, where we've been for 12 years. I am perfectly happy as a physician and a scientist, and we have 2 kids. And I got to talk to these guys later because we're about to go through the college application process. You'll tell me that everything's going to be okay. So it is fabulous to be in this role, to be able to be a clinician, to be able to be a researcher, and to be able to have a family and have it all work. It just juggles at different times in your life.
My name is Helen, and I am an alumni of San Diego State here in San Diego. I live in Brawley, California, which is in Imperial County, and I graduated in 2008, and I commuted for 3 years. I was committed to getting a master's degree in social work and bringing that work back home where I live. I too was extremely impacted by my internship, which was at UCSD. My second year was at Thornton Hospital, and there I got to round with the LCSWs at Morris Cancer Center in the psychology department. So that is where I fell in love with working with persons with cancer and that entire process. As I grew in my understanding of cancer, I came to expand my understanding working with cancer patients in Imperial County through the Cancer Resource Center of the Desert. I've been with them since 2008. I was hired in 2009 as a medical social worker. And so I was able to witness the challenges that the local cancer patients from my community went through to get their treatment at UCSD. So I was committed to really making a difference in helping to facilitate that experience, and have been immersed in the local oncology centers there, and have, as a small community organization, have been working with research since about 2009, have learned many things. And as young researchers in education, whatever is inspiring you, find a good mentor to be able to take the right steps, and hopefully you'll encounter an excellent community partner. Those two are really amazing. And so working with Dr. Sue in advocating for women's health with young breast cancer survivors has been an easy transition in working with our research study.
So we want to tell you about this project, Creating Bridges to Women's Healthcare and Young Breast Cancer Survivors. So I think this was really born, I'm trained as an epidemiologist, so I really want to know what cancer treatments are related to what reproductive outcomes. But then I'm also a clinician, so it became really obvious that as we were publishing our papers or presenting at national meetings or local meetings, but still patients and clinicians don't often get the care that they want because this information just doesn't get disseminated or implemented with any type of fidelity. So then we sort of shifted the work of the lab to understand how can you better spread evidence-based care quicker. One of the first lessons learned is going to be one solution doesn't apply to all, but you have to tailor for your context. So for example, I super know mostly how to treat hot flashes, how to try to prevent infertility, how to manage sexual side effects, but that's kind of in my head, right? But how will you deliver it in these different care settings? And then I think that how we met was one of my students was presenting at a meeting, and it was another partnership project where there was a presenter also at the meeting, and then they met, and that's how we connected. I think we connected after Christmas Day, like 2-3 years ago, and that started this project. So it's not the two of us, it's all of these good people who are partnered with us. So for this project, we're partnered with Helen, but Sally Romero is one of our project scientists. Bonnie Kaiser is a medical anthropologist at UCSD. Fran Hyam is one of the social worker investigators here at SDSU. We have community advisory board to make sure that the project really fits and has the voice of the Imperial County population. And so Helena Hoyt is one of our, actually here at SDSU IB nursing leads, as well as on our community advisory board. Tanya Portillo and Maribel Vizcarra are both young breast cancer survivors. And we're partnered with El Central Regional Medical Center and Pioneers Medical Health District, which are the two cancer treatment or cancer care delivery systems in Imperial Valley.
Yes, next. So when I talk about as a community organization and meeting and connecting with a researcher, for us, it's really critical that we work with someone who is just as passionately interested in the population we're helping. So as Dr. Sue spoke about connecting that one Christmas day a few years ago, it didn't start off as a project. It started off as dialogue. And her question was, what do you do when a young woman who has breast cancer, what do you do if they're interested in fertility preservation or if they're experiencing things that are negative? So what we did was, from that dialogue, it turned into a pilot project that was funded by the California Breast Cancer Research Program. From that pilot project, we successfully completed it, and we were awarded this 3-year project. But it's critical to address these needs that go not fully addressed, and that's where Dr. Sue was able to help us with that.
So the scientific premise really is that these adverse reproductive health effects, they can be prevented or they can be reduced or managed. But you have to get care in order for these adverse reproductive health outcomes to be either reduced or prevented. And so that's why for over 10 years, there have been oncology guidelines that specifically say, if you have a young breast cancer patient, she's either newly diagnosed or post-treatment, you are supposed to ask about reproductive health needs. So it starts with that. And so the bottom is really trying to get at, you need to understand the context of that young cancer survivor and how that fits with oncofertility care expertise. And that's what, that's what this project is centered around.
We created some tools that were garnered input from our cancer patients as well as our medical providers. And we were able to create these simplistic tools for our patients and for the providers that are in English and Spanish, addressing culturally appropriate, responsive information. And this is another tool. One is on fertility preservation, the other is on their sexual health. And that is all facilitated through Cancer Patient Navigators, which is the service that the Cancer Resource Center provides.
So the goal of the trial that we are actually starting, we started last week, is that our goal is we're going to increase the fidelity of clinic-based screening of young breast cancer patients at diagnosis and post-treatment for their reproductive health needs. We want to increase appropriate referrals between oncology and reproductive health. Hopefully through this process, navigation and education with social workers will improve both the knowledge of these cancer survivors and undergoing the care that improves their reproductive health. So we'll come back in a year and tell you how it went. But a lot of work has gone into this, and thanks for having us.
One thing I think is really critical is the telehealth access to the specialty care that Dr. Sue provides. She's the director of oncofertility at Moore's Cancer Center. And for that specialty to be accessible to the women in my community is critical. So we're very excited about that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Sue. Thank you, Helen, so much. Lovely presentation. People like Dr. Sue and Helen are very important people in this world, especially to people like me who use their services regularly. And I'm here today because I'm an advocate and I believe in activism, but I am not a healthcare worker. My name is Tammy Blackburn. I am a stage 4 breast cancer patient, and I actually was invited to be part of this lovely project and this partnership between UCSD and SDSU, and I'm incredibly grateful because of my lovely peers on campus who thought that I might be able to share some of my story, which I think is important. And on 2017, it was Labor Day weekend, and it was a Friday afternoon, and I was right upstairs in this building because I worked at SDSU alumni. And I received a call at 4 p.m. that my biopsy came back positive, and I had tested positive for breast cancer, ductal carcinoma in situ. And it's just a form of saying that initially they see it in one local space in my left breast. And I went through the whole treatment for an entire year. I had chemotherapy, I had surgery, and I had 45 fractions of radiation for 45 straight days. And I was deemed on June 25th that I had no evidence of disease. My cancer was in fact cured at that point until it wasn't. And about 5 months later, my cancer came back. There's a very good likelihood that my cancer, there could have been a microcell there that was hiding in the MRI or the scan, that perhaps I really was diagnosed with stage 4 at the very beginning, and I was a de novo patient rather than stage 3, which is where I was initially diagnosed. And so back into treatment I went. And that level of treatment from stage 3 to stage 4 is very, very different. So that is just to give you some context of what happened and what I am coping with now, because there is no cure for what I have. My disease is deemed terminal. If something else doesn't happen to me, this disease will get me. But I intend to live a quality of life and as many years as I can. And when you're working with your oncologist and people like Dr. Sue and all the other important people who are advocates for us as patients, these are the people that we lean on, which is why these panel members are so important, which is why the work that you all are doing and the research that we are doing here with UCSD and San Diego State is so crucial. So what about advocacy and what about activism, and what did I do with my situation? So during my treatment and chemo, I remember locking eyes with a young gal. I think she might have been 14, 15 years old. She was being pushed into the infusion center, which is the unhappiest place on earth. And she was frail. She had dark rings around her eyes. I believed her parents were pushing her in the wheelchair, and she was getting hooked up to her chemo. And I was just getting ready to wrap up my session. And I just got fixated on her. And I don't know why, but I just did. She was young, and I thought about, her path and why her, and did she have slumber parties before this and enjoy life, and what would all that be for her? And as I was driving home that evening, I had a lot of time to think because I was sitting in I-805 traffic south coming back. Those of you from Southern California know that. And it dawned on me that there are likely students here at San Diego State that might be suffering from the same thing. And what must they be going through? And if I'm 45 years old, 46 years old at the time, and I have a whole life of experience to be able to tap back into to say, how am I going to get through what I'm going through? But when you're 18, 19, and 20, and you're in college, the best years of your life, what are they supposed to think? They don't have those skills. So long story short, I created a fund here at San Diego State through the wonderful partnership of our administrators who made it happen here at San Diego State. I named the fund for my two doctors. It's called the Wallace, Shatsky, Blackburn Courage Through Cancer Fund, because it takes courage to be a physician, to be a physician scientist, to be an oncologist, to be a student, to be a caretaker, to be a family member of somebody who is suffering from this insidious disease. And I'm happy to be an advocate for our students because our goal is to bring them across the finish line. Our goal is to help them graduate. And cancer is trying to take that away. The financial toxicity of cancer is something that most people don't understand. The emotional stress, the wear down, the faculty and the lecturers who we get calls from here at San Diego State that say, this student is suffering and I need to get them some help and they have cancer. So this is what we've created here at San Diego State. And I'm just happy to be able to share some of that context with you and to say that we need to be better advocates. We need more advocates. We need to be more active. And it is an honor to serve as an advocate for our students here at San Diego State and take them across the finish line to earn their degree. Thank you. And now, Carly, please come up.
Hello. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and just talk about my experience as an undergraduate student, which is a little bit earlier than these folks' past, kind of just talking about my exposure to research, my involvement in student activism, kind of why I'm involved, and what I've learned so far. A little bit of background on me. I'm an undergraduate student here at SDSU. I'm an interdisciplinary studies major with disciplines in biology, public health, and women's studies. And after I graduate, I'm hoping to apply to MD PhD programs and eventually become a physician scientist. So when I got to SDSU and decided I wanted to apply to medical school, I was just doing some research on what are the requirements outside of
going to class and getting a 4.0 and doing amazing on the MCAT. And I read a lot about how it's important to be involved in something that you're passionate about. And at the time, I was on the rowing team and very involved with athletics, but I was really interested in becoming more involved with something that had to do with public health or gender equity or social justice. So I just started joining clubs on campus, applying to internships, and those basically exposed me to the things that I'm really passionate about now. And I'm gonna quickly go through some of the things that I've been involved in. First was my first research experience was actually through the Partnership Scholars Program. In 2019, I was involved in a project that was looking at colorectal cancer screening rates in federally qualified health centers. And in addition to that project, we also had weekly workshops where I learned more about health disparities and social determinants of health, which are some topics that I briefly covered in my public health courses, but it kind of like ignited a spark in me wanting to pursue a research career that involved those things. So I'm hoping to eventually have a project that involves gender equity or race or status and how that impacts disease outcomes. So in addition to the research that I've been involved in through the Partnership Scholars Program and other experiences after that, I was also involved on campus in the Black Student Science Organization and also the Women's Resource Center, where I held multiple positions. And one of the things I really wanted to emphasize and hone on is that there's lots of different forms of student activism and just advocacy in general. And one of my favorite parts of being involved in both the Women's Resource Center and the Black Student Science Organization was like the opportunity to be a mentor and how important it is to be a mentor and help other generations of folks in research and activism kind of move up the ladder. I initially thought that being an activist meant, you know, planning a protest and running for office, but it was exciting to kind of learn that there's so many other aspects to advocacy and activism, and I'm happy to be involved in those. One of the other things that I really kind of learned on and honed in both my activism, but also my research is learning more about having an inclusive perspective and kind of just like inclusivity in general, whether it comes to race or gender or status. And it's been exciting for me to think about what I've learned here in these organizations and positions, but also apply it to a research question in the future. And I actually wanted to end my presentation more on what I've learned from these experiences. And the most important thing to me is balancing everything. In addition to research and activism, I'm a full-time student. I'd like to go to medical school, so my grades are really important. It's also nice to have a social life, some rest every once in a while. So I kind of just wanted to emphasize on the things that I've learned so far and what I'm hoping to apply in my future. One, being healthy and taking care of yourself physically and mentally is really important. There are times where my mental health is being impacted, and then that's affecting my work on my classes, in the lab, etc. Another thing that kind of ties to the first point is remembering why you're here in the first place as a student and your long-term goals. It's getting into medical school, graduate school, the job of your dreams. It's important to make sure you're doing well now and able to apply. And then third is just making sure that you give yourself grace and rest. And I want to emphasize that it's very fulfilling and rewarding to be involved in activism and research, but it's also draining and tiring. And it's important to think about yourself and kind of give yourself that grace. And then lastly, just being a student, it's hard to sometimes think about your impact. And when you have class and you have all these obligations, it's hard to realize that the small things that you're doing really do matter. And what I wanted to kind of end with is a quote that my personal trainer actually tells me, so you can apply it to physical activity, but also apply it to your courses, what you do in lab, your activism, and that's small, consistent change over a significant period of time leads to monumental results. Thanks.
That was amazing. Thank you to all of you for sharing your experiences there. Just a reminder, I'll be asking some questions, but if anyone from the audience has a question, there's a microphone here that this gentleman is turning on. And for the people in the live stream, we need to use our microphones to ask the questions and answer the questions so everyone can hear. So as you guys are thinking of something to ask, I will kick it off. Each of you spoke on really different aspects of advocacy and cancer advocacy. I know you only had time to share just a small snippet, but I wanted to go back and see or ask, what does cancer advocacy look like to you? Why is it important to you? And why should others care about it? Maybe we can go down the line.
So for me, I think it looks like the community, right? The community we serve, the communities we live in. Those are the people who are often affected, by everything that goes on. And so I know my staff looks like the community we serve, is reflective of that community. And I think that's something that's very important. Not that if you don't look like your community, you can't make an impact. But, it's not that we're giving them a voice, because these are people who have voices, is that we're making sure they're invited to the table. Because oftentimes they're not invited to the table. So it's our job to make sure that they are and that they're heard. And I think that's what we do with the privilege that we had, that, I had the privilege that I did have my parents, push me to go to school. And now I am where I am. And so I'm using that privilege and I always use my parents as my gauge for everything. Even when I'm trying to convince somebody to get a prostate exam or a mammogram, I'm like, how did I convince my mom and my dad? And so I kind of see everybody as my mom and my dad. And so for me, it feels, it looks like the community, but it feels personal. So.
I think that my answer to that would be really kind of listening. And for me, that listening means listening to our patients, and that when there is something that they ask, because patients ask the best questions, and you don't know the answer, then you got to go find a rigorous way to answer it, and then bring it not only to that patient who had the question, but to other patients like her.
In my experience of learning from the people that I serve in Imperial County, I've always said to my team, and wherever I can share it, are the people that come to us, they have been our teachers. In many cases, listening and really utilizing empathy in such a healthy way to get a perspective on what those individuals are experiencing and understanding what this life-altering disease is. They don't fully understand it, and they have some profound needs, practically, health-wise, emotionally, with their family. And if we can listen and fully understand what those needs are, to me, the advocacy and the activism is picking it out and designing something that can really raise awareness, to teach the individual, to teach the systems, because they navigate so many systems that for us, we have to learn all of those aspects that they don't know, and we don't know everything, but we certainly are in a position as a service provider, as medical social workers, which we call ourselves patient navigators, to navigate them through this difficult space, to be able to identify what those needs are, listen, and if we don't have the answers, we certainly can tap our networks and find out what those answers are in a way that maybe those individuals don't. And so that's what that advocacy to me and that activism is can we push the system? Can we articulate the needs of them at a ground level? And to me, that's what activism is.
For me, it's personal for a patient who has cancer. Obviously, you can imagine why I do what I do, but it's about speaking for the people who are afraid to talk about it. And not a lot of people like to talk about their cancer journey, and I don't blame them. I don't like to talk about my cancer journey, but I will and I can and I will continue to do it until I'm no longer here if it's going to help others, because it's a very scary topic. And it's one, as Helen mentioned, that there's a lot of people who don't know how to navigate and their head is on a swivel and they're spinning because they just received terrible news that either the student has cancer or their mom or dad just called them and said, you need to come home and drop out of SDSU. You have to get a job to help us pay for bills. So these are people who don't really have a voice. So advocacy here for me means that I'm seeking out our students at SDSU and inviting them to apply for these emergency crisis funds, which are available to them. And in order for me to do that and to have this fund, I have to go out and publicly speak. I have to go raise money. And I do that with the brilliant support and the incredible, generous support of not only our staff members here at SDSU, but it's the people, it's the donors who help raise the money, right? They're the true heroes here. Our donors are the true heroes. And I know if I sit down at lunch with them or at dinner, or if I go to a speaking engagement with our donors of San Diego State University and I share my story, there's a really good chance that they're going to be touched, because who's not touched by a cancer story? I mean, it's everywhere. We're all impacted in some way. And when I speak about the students and how many of them drop out every year and how many of them will likely, when they do drop out because of the financial toxicity, will never return to earn the degree that they dreamed of. They'll never come back here and have a social life on campus. So why not keep them here on this campus and help their family and help them? Let's pay their tuition. Let's pay their books. Let's buy their meal plans. Let's get them the housing that they need. How about we lift that burden and we put it over here? And how about we let them focus on what they need to focus on? And that is what advocacy means to me, is to going out and speaking on their behalf to the people who have the means to help them, and they're saving them.
Those responses are a little bit tough to follow, but I think that for me, cancer research is personal. I wanted to be involved with the Partnership Scholars Program specifically because of the folks in my family who had cancer. I think that lots of people are connected to cancer in that way, either a friend, family member, themselves. So for me, being involved in that and kind of having a career that revolves around some of the things that I've learned about when it comes to health disparities for certain populations who maybe get cancer more often, and trying to figure out why, it's connected back to my grandma who had cancer. So I think for me, it's just advocating for everyone's grandma, or like everyone's mother.
Thank you. Those are all very passionate responses, which clearly means you're in the right place. Okay, so in this age, a lot of activism and advocacy is done online. But how do you reach the community members who lack access to the internet, or that's not how they prefer to engage? And I'll just leave it open to whoever might want to answer that first.
I'll take that one. For some reason, in the area where I live, and many of the people we help, they do not access the internet. Some have a cell phone that does and doesn't always work, or have a plan that is workable for them. So what we've done is design our work to be very adaptable to whatever those needs are for those individuals. Many times, as a patient is needing to access insurance, their medical appointments, accessing transportation support, what we do is sit with them in making those phone calls. If we're communicating with Social Security, we are with them on those phone calls, either three-way or together. The point is that they feel supported. If they don't fully understand the questions that are coming at them really quickly, English or Spanish, it doesn't matter, just helping them to feel supported, especially with technology. And so some are very good with technology, many are not, and they're sick, and they're just challenged with trying to get across what all of their needs are. They don't have the words. So by having that advocate with them, able to understand the context of who they are, and conveying either in written form or verbally or telehealth-wise, whatever that is, to initiate that connection for those individuals. That's what's really common. Do you want to talk about what we talked about this morning with our study?
So as we said, our trials just started underway, and we're in a phase where we haven't started the intervention to routinely screen patients, but starting to really recruit patients to answer these questionnaires on their oncofertility care experiences before we start the intervention. And so we have all kinds of tools available to us at UCSD to be able to send electronic health records through, like questionnaires and nice, back-end databases. And then really the question was, what is the likelihood that patients will actually use this form in this format where you can see these, nice UCSD stamped, informed consents, but it's in teeny tiny words on your phone? Not going to work. It doesn't work for the context. And so it was a very vigorous discussion how much time to invest in all of these tools that don't fit the community.
Yes. I'll add to that. So we know that COVID highlighted that digital divide, right? That, everybody thought it was easy. We'll just go virtual, but not everybody can go virtual. And so we actually had the same issue as Helen and Dr. Sue in that, we at first, as a researcher, sometimes you think, what's going to make my life easier, right? And it's like, well, let's go digital. Let's make online surveys. And lesson learned, you need to make sure that your point is your patients, your participants, what's easier for them, not what's easier for you. We wanted to eliminate, data entry errors and all that time it takes. And so we actually are writing a manuscript about that digital tech. And so what we've done now is offer, number one, for patients, they get to choose an online survey. They can't do the survey. We will mail them a paper version. They don't want to do the paper version. We actually do an interview over the phone. So we've learned to offer these multiple things. And then for overcoming the digital divide, we actually ended up developing a loaner library where we lend out mobile hotspots, tablets, working with our community health workers, our promotoras. They're the boots on the ground. So oftentimes they're the ones who are in contact with people who have, issues with technology or don't have access to the tools. I spent the majority of the beginning of COVID teaching our community partners how to use Zoom, how to use Teams, how to work this. And I actually ended up being like a Zoom expert that I never thought I would be. Learned a lot about it because I had to teach it. And so it is time intensive, but it's definitely worth it. But I think especially now if we think about, we're working with some patients in rural areas in the Antelope Valley for us. And sometimes those areas don't even get Wi-Fi. So, supporting some of those bills that will allow Wi-Fi in those areas. So I think we still have a long ways to go, but I think it's still giving people options and not solely relying on digital tools would really help reach those people who we don't want to leave behind in this digital divide.
Thank you. Just a reminder, any questions from the audience, just raise your hand or go to the mic. You touched on this a little bit, Helen and Irene, about your partnership, that it just started off as a conversation. But what does it take for a community organization to partner with an academic institution? In a minute or two.
It takes a lot of capacity. We're a small nonprofit. We are not, we're an independent small nonprofit organization. We have been involved in research as a small nonprofit since 2009, when it was only 2 staff and volunteers. However, working with researchers from San Diego State University since then, we're most appreciative to Dr. E.J. Koh from the School of Social Work, from Dr. J.D. Beck from School of Public Health. They taught us over the years on how to function with research, working with the IRB, getting city certification. As our staff grew, we began to build capacity. And what was really critical in working with the researchers, and some were students, research assistants, working with the professors, is really ensuring that those that we're interfacing with are patients, because it's our relationship with the community that has to be preserved. We're the ones doing the work. We have to do the regular work and research. And then when research comes in, we had to learn that dance. Along with, as we grew, we are now a staff of 11, 6 full-time, and the rest are working these crazy part-time schedules. But we're all patient navigators. And now that we have a larger organization, we have had to expand in some business side areas, expanding with our liability coverage, because being partnered with Dr. Sue and funded through the California Breast Cancer Research Program, we had to up our liability coverage because we were going into the oncology clinic working with patients. The other aspect is we have, since about 2009, 2010, we have always been audited by a CPA unnecessarily. We didn't have the amount of money to require it, but our board insisted on it for transparency, and man, did that pay off. It paid off in being able to apply for other types of grants, but the history of always being audited, and we ultimately hit the point where financially we needed to be audited, but we were already used to that. So that when it came time to apply for the California Breast Cancer Research Project's application process, we did not need a fiscal pass-through. That's a requirement. If you're so small and you're not being audited, you have to have somebody that's going to stand in your stead, ensuring that fiscally you're going to fulfill all these obligations. So we didn't need that. It was, as a small organization, it was my first opportunity to be a co-PI with Dr. Sue. So it opened us up into some really great opportunity, and we had to be a community partner is very challenging, because you have to become like a pretzel. You have to stretch 10 different ways, still produce your service, provide your service, be responsible with the commitments you have with research, fundraise, write grants. And that's what a 501c3 does. It's just you have to stay viable, not forgetting who we're serving, why we're serving, the inspiration around the people we help. But that's the challenge of a community-based organization, building enough capacity to partner, not just with UCSD, but partner with SDSU, and allowing us to be in a position to learn, provide input, provide a powerful service, and really raise awareness to a data-driven, evidence-based style of story, that a meaningful measure that we're trying to produce, so that people can understand what is happening in this medically underserved rural area that we live in, and to the most vulnerable population of people who have cancer. So it's all of that. We're committed to learning, expanding, and growing as an organization. So yeah, it takes a lot.
Thank you. Carly, this question will be for you. Oh. I'm going to warn you. So I think sometimes there's a perception with youth that they don't get taken seriously, and then in this forum of advocacy and activism, that their voice isn't really heard. What, I guess, tips do you have, recommendations do you have, and any thoughts about that?
That's a good question. I think I touched on it a little bit in my presentation, but it's just like knowing yourself that the work that you're doing matters, and that sometimes you're going to be like in an interaction where you don't feel heard, but there's always going to be someone that will listen to you. And it's really important not to give up when you feel like you're not heard. I think that being an undergraduate student, and really being anyone, it's important to have a good mentor and have someone who will definitely listen to you and help advocate for you in a situation where you feel like you might not be able to portray or say what you think is right. Yeah, I think I'll end on that.
What about those on the panel who've worked with youth and young adults? Any thoughts?
So
luckily my project highlighted our work with youth. So I've actually been really amazed by our youth when we work with them. I learn so much from them, and it's just amazing. You know, they still, even though they're young, they still have lived experience. And so, you know, that lived experience is still going to be much more valuable than just me as a researcher coming in, you know, not having that same lived experience. Plus, they also see things from a different lens. And so it's really important to take that into consideration. And so, you know, all we had to do is give them the training and the skills, and they were able to run with it. So this was something that was based on their needs, what they saw in their community. And we, you know, we do, of course, because we're researchers, we do measure the teens pre and post. And one of the biggest things that we saw was the increase in confidence. And that confidence for them to talk to policymakers by being in this program and being part of this peer health network. And I think that makes all the difference, is that they knew that if they, you know, they had somebody who could be heard. And luckily in this one, you know, that doesn't always happen with advocacy, right? You usually fail tons of times before anybody makes a change. And like I said, this one was a great experience for them in that the first time they did it, something happened. And so I think it was really wonderful experience for them. We use, you know, we use photo voice often because it's something that, you know, doesn't require a lot. And so we use it a lot with our community workers and our community programs. And we also have tobacco cessation programs that are youth focused, and the youth get to develop the programming. But yeah, I think they have an amazing, you know, perspective, and definitely, you know, make an impact. And that's why I chose that program, because this is somebody that maybe somebody thinks I'm just young. What difference can I make? And these students were able to change their environment and, you know, this park in their city.
Thank you. So we're going to wrap up here. We have about 4 minutes left. So I thought maybe we can go down one by one. And if each one of you could share a tip for becoming an advocate or a cancer advocate, or your best piece of advice.
Yeah.
Do you want me to start this time? Okay. So kind of touched on this before, but I think the most important thing as an undergraduate student especially is just putting your foot in the door, getting involved with something. Join a club. If you don't like it, join another club, or apply for a research internship. If you don't get it, apply for another one. I think that getting involved just takes a little bit of oomph in jumping into something, and then you'll start to learn about what you like and what you're passionate about, and things you might not really like as much.
Fill your cup with joy. Do something that you want to do that's meaningful to you. You know, make yourself joyful. Life is so short, right? You know, I have a new perspective. 4 years ago, my life changed. I want my old life back, and I'm not getting my old life back, and that's the reality. So it's a good reminder to do what you want to do. Make sure that you're fulfilled in everything you do. Know that you can't do it by yourself. Know that synergy and getting together with your partners and other people are going to make it stronger, better, faster, quicker, and all the things that you want it to be. And don't sit back and wait for something to happen, because you're already making things happen.
I think it's critical to, we live in a very busy world. There's so many demands on us personally, within our families, within our circles, and within our professional lives and our academic lives. There's so many demands. For me, what keeps things so fresh and in perspective, I've been doing this a long time and I love it. And I'm not burned out. And it's because I find meaning and inspiration as much as possible in everything I engage in. There's aspects of my world that isn't inspirational, but I figure out I'm not a complainer. I'm not a whiner about it. I figure out, okay, I'm going to get through this, and this is good because this is going to be fun later. I'll focus on enjoying things, enjoying myself, enjoying people, enjoying the work, whatever energy is going out, but I'm inspired about what I do. Even when we're dealing with some very sad, difficult subjects, the power to be humble enough to listen, not have all the answers, and to find a stableness with being still with somebody who's broken and allowing that to be. And that to me inspires me, because for me, I can just be that hand for them and without words. And there's a meaningful of connection. So the work I do and the team I have, we have a very good time together. We laugh a lot. We're very clear and respectful of what's happening in the work we do, but we find inspiration. And I think if you can do it in whatever you're doing, even if it's a class you don't like, you're going to learn something. And I am an avid lifelong learner of many things. So I always find a way to just expand. And to me, that to be on that cutting edge of life is critical.
I get why it's hard to be at the end of like a row of good, awesome responses. So good luck. I think that sort of driven by, if you see something that's not quite right and you can do something about it, even if it's a little hard, like why wouldn't you? Like this delivery of women's healthcare is so important and I can do it. So why wouldn't I more than seeing one patient at a time, right? So if you can, just stretch yourself a little bit and just go do it.
So I'm just going to use a little bit of everybody's. So I think number one, it's something you have to be passionate about because it is a long drawn out process. And so that's why you have to kind of throw yourself in there, kind of like Carly said. But, if you're passionate about it, it's going to help you through all those ups and downs because it can be very defeating at times. Advocacy, sometimes, it doesn't go your way. And so you kind of have to stick it out. I mean, you would think advocacy just goes on a slope, right? That you're put, but it doesn't. Unfortunately, it goes like this, and sometimes it goes backwards. I mean, we're seeing that with women's health. So if you really have that passion, I think it's going to help you stick it out in those hard times. I've seen some of our students defeated when, the city council shuts down our tobacco policies. And, we talk about how many years it's gotten us to get to this point, and finding all those little wins, a little bit kind of like what Helen was saying. So you want to be able to find every little win and celebrate it, every little step. And I think it goes back to Carly's quote, right? That all these little incremental changes are going to lead to this big monumental change.
Thank you, all of you, for being here today and sharing all your tips and expertise. Is this me too? All right, so grab your phones and scan that QR code to fill out the evaluation. Let's see. And there will also be an email with the link that you can click on if you prefer to do that later. And let's see, I guess next will be our networking session outside. So if you still have a lingering question, please feel free to come ask us during this session. Thank you.
Thank you.